Hi, and thank you for joining us today. You're listening to Radio Ear Network, and I'm your host, Julie Salant, and this is Motivation Addict on Society Bites Radio, social interaction for the mind and soul. Our guest today is Alexis Ray. She is the owner of the Podcast Guest Club, and we'll find out more when we return. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am so pleased that you are here. I am your host, Julie Salant, and today our guest is Alexis Ray. Welcome to the show, Alexis.
Thank you. So glad I could make it.
Yay, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely. So I've been looking forward to talking with Alexis. One of her taglines was how a former energy vampire transformed herself and became a ray of light. And she was a former hot mess, quote unquote, and now she really helps people experience true miracles. Can you give us a little background on how you kind of transformed yourself? I guess that's where we should start.
Sure, absolutely. Well, the real how became a process for change. And so the process for change is through awareness and then acceptance of what you've become aware of. And action taken on that, you get change. And so for me, that was sort of an intuitive development. I was in so much pain for so long that I had to do something. And so I heard this idea that our beliefs create our reality. And so I was experimenting. I tried this, I like held out my hands and I believed that I could manifest bread. And I was like imagining, right, a loaf of bread. It never showed up. And I thought, well, maybe I need to be more specific, like sliced rye with seeds. I kept trying. But ultimately what I realized, Julie, is the need for an inventory of every thought that I had. And whether that came from me or someone else, I unearthed some things that were adopted maybe as a child, just to protect myself from the narcissistic bullies that I was raised by. And when I realized as a grown-up that those beliefs were still in place, and one of them is key, I'd love to share this, and that key particular belief was all businessmen are spiritually shallow. Now, I don't know where I got it, probably from my dad, but yeah, what it did was it kept me from becoming a business person. And I thought, I'm on a spiritual path. I always will be. I can't sell my soul for a buck. And so it really kept me stuck. And so being able to go in, literally writing makes it real, it gets it out of your head, put it down on paper, you can see it, and then you can let it go and you can replace it. So that was the process for change.
Wow. And I completely understand what you're saying. I didn't have it in that context, but I believed for so long that if you're on a spiritual path and you're helping people you want to serve, two things. One, it wasn't safe. And two, that if you're a spiritual leader or healer or however you're helping people, that you can't get paid well for it because that would be bad and that wouldn't work. And I think a lot of us had that imprinted on us from when we were small. And it's huge because obviously to be successful and help others and serve others, your tank needs to be full and you need to have the funds and the revenue to do so. Not just that, but also spiritually and physically as well. So that's a huge. So when did you realize that needed to change?
Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing. It's almost like, so a guy walks into a bar. So here's the thing. I was desperate for answers, and I decided to interview CEOs that were living their dreams. And I hosted a show called Living Dreams. That was my first of 5 shows now. And so in that first show, I wanted to find out, how in the heck did you decide what to do? And then how do you make decisions to run your multi-million-dollar company, sir? And what I discovered, and this is so long ago that it was really kind of a hush hush thing. Don't say the word intuition. Don't say, I don't know, I'm special. So they
Yes.
would say things like, well, I kind of have a feeling. I'm like, it's a feeling thing. You're running your whole show on a feeling, really. And I was very, very argumentative, very skeptical, very cynical person. Thanks, Mom. Got lots of traits from there. And I learned how to undo. Sometimes it's best just to know what you don't want. At least you won't have to be that. I don't know what else you'll
Yes.
be. So I learned what not to be. But in the course of interviewing these guys, I learned that they were actually very spiritual. And the thing that they were trying to tell me in so many words was that they lived by this thing inside that I've come to call the big yes. And it can look crazy to other people and it can defy logic. And yet, excuse me, if you don't do it, you regret it. Whether it's trying to find a parking spot or marry someone, the big yes will tell you inside, from the inside out, whether or not you should be doing something. And I realized that they were really describing intuition. And so my next show was called The Big Yes. But in the course of talking to these men who were living their dreams, I realized that I had to scratch out that all businessmen were spiritually shallow. And so I just continued writing this inventory. It took about 4 months. And, literally the I believe at the top of a piece of paper, and every single thought went down, and nobody got to see that but me. And it was tremendously helpful. It's the first step in creating big change in a person's psyche and then in their outer world.
Wow. So that's amazing. So it's interesting that they're so successful and they weren't actually calling it their intuition. I wonder if they would now, but they might not. But I think
Yeah.
the big yes is an amazing way to describe it because a lot of people ask me, how do you connect with your intuition? So I think that that's wonderful and that's a good step. But this tool that you just described to write things down, and you just started out with what I believe, and then everything just kind of brain dumped on that, and then what did you do with that information?
So yeah, and I did literally write down every single thought that, I mean, I literally just sat there and it took, I don't know, probably months total. I don't remember exactly, but then I got to go back and review it. And that's the awareness part. And what happened, Julie, is really interesting, is that I unearthed, I call them like sentries, like guards that had been hired, air quote, hired by me when whatever threat was in my world. I grew up in a very chaotic environment. And so I would have, I've adopted these philosophies to survive, and they were still operating on sort of like a background application, just constantly running. And I had to gently fire them. And you don't do it with anger. You actually love away the things that no longer serve us, because what we resist persists. And so, without being angry at myself for being angry, have you ever
Hmm.
gotten mad at yourself for being mad? Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
yeah, or having, like, what are you, stupid? And then I'd be stupid for it just is awful self-flagellation. Let me get the long leather whip out. And yeah, real good at that one. Um, but being able to assess where it came from really wasn't that important. So here's the other part that really, really matters, and that is delete the need to understand. Because trying to understand why someone hurt someone, trying to understand why I did, don't do it. It doesn't matter. What is what shows up or showed up, and what you make of it is up to you. In the end, it's a neutral event that you can decide what you want to do with next. And so having all of those things down on a piece of paper helped me so much to realize all this chatter and clatter in my head. And I could just start to eliminate them and even attempt to replace them, and made this lofty goal. Maybe someday, gee, wouldn't it be nice if somebody called me happy go lucky? Oh my God, what a reach that was. And it happened. It did.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing. And I think that that's such a big transformation. And so many of us have that ticker tape going around in our head, and we talk badly to ourselves, worse than we would never say out loud to anybody. The things that come through your mind, like, you're stupid, you'll never do this, you've tried a million times, why do you think this time's going to be different? You're an idiot. And when you have that and it's unconscious, you don't realize it's even playing. I think what you said is completely correct. The first step is to notice it and then to not attach, not beat yourself up for it. You need to be able to let it go with love. Because if you beat yourself up, it's only going to get louder and get worse, right?
It's true. It does. It perpetuates the legacy that was drilled into us for whatever reason. But what I've noticed is I have a good friend who's in a really messed up relationship, and she's just so hung up on why he treats her like that. And I said, "Sweetie, you'll never understand the mind of a psycho. You've got to delete the need to understand so you can move forward. It is what it is. So,
Hmm.
do you want more of it or do you want less?" And that's pretty much the question I had to pose every single time. Do you want more of this or less of this? And make a
That's
decision
that's
from that.
that's a good question to have. So once you do this and you release some of these feelings and these imprints, you've got some really great space. Do you consciously put in something positive to replace the negative?
Yes, I did, and that's where that lofty goal that, "Are you kidding me? Happy-go-lucky, you? A ray of light? What are you kidding me?" By the way, that's a name I adopted. By the way, that's a great story. Maybe we'll get into it, but there was no way that that was a reasonable thing. But what I said was, "Dear God, whoever listens when we say prayers like that, please, if there's ever a way that someday I can get out of this horrible dark hole I'm having in the middle of my being, and this dreadful being that I've become, please, if I can turn this around and help somebody, that would be great." And so I would start to replace, the things that people said to me. "You should be a lawyer. You'd be great on the stand. You're argumentative as hell." And I was desperate for understanding what was going on, is what that was. And I was also desperate to be loved. And so I would literally argue with someone if they paid me a compliment because I just wanted them to say it again. I was so needy. Oh my
Wow.
God.
No, but you
Oh,
know what? It's a lot of us, it's very difficult for us to accept compliments. I've had to work on that myself, because we push it away and your ego mind will override it. Oh, that's not true. That's just ridiculous. How could that be true? Because we're talking to ourselves, the self-talk is so bad, that we can't even accept it. And then somebody had said to me once, when you basically rebuff that person, you're shutting them down and sending that compliment back to them as kind of a big old rejection, and that you're not deserving. So on so many levels, it kind of registered with me that it wasn't so much about me and it was about what they're getting back if you're thinking of serving somebody. And just by saying, oh, thank you, and moving on, you don't have to make a big deal about it. It just becomes, something that is ingrained into you after a while, and you can accept compliments, which you should, because
yes.
everybody's good at certain things. Everyone, right?
Yeah, absolutely, hon. And not only that, but you know what? It's their opinion. And if they think that, then so be it. Who am I to say, That's
Yeah.
their opinion. Let them have
Just,
it. Just say
yes,
thanks.
yes. So just as the flip side of that, so let's just think about this for a minute. The flip side is that somebody says something to you, and a lot of times you can blow it off and it doesn't matter. But sometimes someone says something and it gets inside your spirit. And if it's negative, it really bothers you, and it throws your whole game off sometimes. That happened to me last week. And I had to really step back and think, the only way it can get into my spirit is if I let it in. So how do you, when you're working with people, how can we filter through that consciously and realize, no, I'm not going to accept that because it's not true for me. That's not my truth. Or they could just be saying something off the cuff and
That is
it's not good for you.
that is such a great question. And how do we recognize what is true about us? And what I've said to other people and working with them is I'll say blah 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 blah, and I said try it on, see what parts fit, kind of like trying on a shirt, and get rid of the rest. And he said, "Well, I want to have more of that feel right." And I said, "Okay, then we can work on that part." It brings up where it is that they want to adopt an idea or something or a compliment, but they're not quite ready for that yet, and that's okay. For me personally, what happens is I have to look at it as objectively as I can. I recently had the same thing happen where someone made a ton of accusations and they've been holding them for years. There was nothing I could do about it at the time, last week when this happened. Could have perhaps years ago, and yet they carried this underneath everything. And I just said, well, it may be true, but I'm the very first person in a room to apologize if I've done something wrong. So if you're not the kind of person that can actually say that and value our friendship, what you say may be true, but I can't be with that. I need somebody who's more straightforward. So
Hmm.
while it may be true that I came out and I don't know if I stepped on their toes or what. I don't know what I did. I still don't know. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, a lot of it's still